Okay, well, my name is Graham Jenkins.
My name's Timothy Berry.
Alex Morrow.
Chris Hungalitis.
This is the military transition.
Chris Kongolotos didn't transition during a booming job market. He transitioned to civilian life during the pandemic. Blanketing the job market with applications and resumes, he found himself as a senior consultant at a top consulting firm. His firm works with Fortune 500 companies, the military, and federal government in more than 20 different sectors. He shared with us what he might do differently and what made the biggest impact on finding success.
Chris Hungalitis, graduated from West Point in 2013, Bachelor of Science in Constitutional Law, commissioned as an armor officer after graduation. The armor branch is kind of like two separate branches, if you will. So there's heavy, which is tanks, or light, which is reconnaissance. And so I stayed on the light side of the house my entire Army career. There's a couple. I was a battle captain at Fort Polk. It was like the middle of the night, and someone came up on the net and was like, "Sir, Bone 1 just checked in on the net. They want a task at purpose." And Bone 1 is not a call sign in the brigade. It was, for any of our aviation assets, it was Wolfpack. So me being like, normal me in the middle of the night, who the hell is Bone 1 and why are they on my net? And the FSO turns to me and goes, "Sir, it's a B-1 bomber. They're stacked up. You have tactical control of this thing. What do you want to do?" I was like, "What can they do?" And they're like, "Well, they got the targeting pod so they can see the ground." "Can they see anything?" "It's cloudy." "No, sir, they can't see anything." So moral of the story is they didn't have anything they could do for me, but it was really cool to have, tactical control of a B-1 bomber. To give another story, so like, if you watch Iron Man, the first one, there's a scene where Tony Stark's in the back drinking a scotch in a Humvee. And while I did not drink a scotch in the back of a Humvee, I did run across the Tigris, because when I was deployed to Iraq, the Tigris is the demarcation between tactical vehicles, so like your Humvees and MRAPs, and your non-tactical vehicles, which were like, our Ford Explorers, and at the time they were armored like Toyota Land Cruisers. So I ran across this bridge with body armor on, backpack. I think I had a laptop under one arm and a rifle. The middle of the beginning of the morning, sun's just coming up. There's Apaches flying around. They weren't flying around for me, but it was cool to pretend. And then jumped in the back of a Toyota Land Cruiser, and one of my guys turned to me and says, "Sir, do you want to rip it?" And so for me, that was the coolest moment I had deployed. Not quite a scotch in the back of a Humvee, but it was pretty close. When I was leaving the Army, I had the opportunity to use an ATV for work, and so I think I put in 150 miles on a weekend on an ATV, just riding around the training area, making sure our guys were safe and had water. And that was an asset that I didn't need from the American taxpayer, but I used it up and had a blast doing it. Probably had more fun than I should have had on an ATV and paid to do it, but it was a lot of fun for me. So I was at Fort Bragg at the time, and I had an awesome squadron executive officer who I sat down with. He was a major. I haven't kept in touch with him recently, but I probably should. And kind of explained to him, "Sir, I don't know what I'm doing long term in the Army. I don't know how this is going to work out, or if I want to stay in or not." And he was great in that he understood where I was able to rattle off all my uncertainties, if you will, and then gave me probably the best advice I got, which was don't base your future in the Army on Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg is its own unique animal. Wait until you find out where you go next. And so I took that advice, went to the career course down at Fort Benning, talked to Branch at the time, and kind of gave him my wish list of this is what I want to do with my career. One of them was to go command at Fort Carson. The other one, I really wanted to go back to West Point and teach, which would have meant I went to grad school. And I understand Branch. They're managing a wide swath of their population to do what's best for the Army. But they kind of took my wish list and slid it off the side of the table and said, "That's great. Go for it if you can, but that's not what we need you to do with your career." And so I understood that, and I was okay with it. I think I left that office really annoyed, it's not going to work out. I went from the office to a set of double doors, approached the door, said okay, we've hit our decision point. This is, we have met the decision criteria matrix for getting out of the Army. Walked through those double doors, and was really comfortable with leaving the Army after that. And I was more upset that I was comfortable with that decision than I was like, leaving the Army. And that's a very nebulous way of approaching it, but as someone who is, put in all the time to figure out what the different metrics were to stay in the Army and what I wanted to do, I figured that was a good time to make the transition. Once I had made that transition, I kind of set a goal for myself. So I was going to give back to the Army as best I could. I was at Fort Benning at the time, so there's plenty of training units around there. And so I wanted to give back to the next generation of future Army leaders. And I wanted to leave the Army on a positive note, having done everything I could, kind of leave the Army exhausted. Long term, I think that probably hindered my career search as far as taking care of myself getting in the Army. But I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to leave the Army going, this is the peg that I can hang my hat on, and I'm done with the Army. We can put this chapter aside. So I think it was really my priorities and my mission and my future was no longer nested within the Army. And so if I'm going to be leaving soldiers, they need someone who is nested within what the Army needs them to. And it was a painful decision to make. And I still had opportunities to lead after making that decision, but for me it was okay, I need to take myself out of that situation and let someone else fill it. For me, it was chaotic in not knowing exactly what the next step was, and knowing I was kind of going to be, I don't want to say wishy-washy, but in a transition space between leaving the Army and finding my next career. That was difficult for me to really understand. As I left the Army, I think anybody else who is leaving the Army should know nobody in the Army has ever left the Army. They don't know what it is outside of the Army, and so they're going to give you advice that isn't really relevant. And they're not going to really know enough about you to give you any kind of good advice. So for anybody, SFL TAP is great, right? It's great for privates who are leaving the Army and want to go be police officers, or they want to go drive trucks. But if you're a, junior captain who's getting out, what do those professional careers look like? They're going to help you write your resume and help you maybe point you in a direction, but they're not going to help get you across the finish line there. I really wished, as I had gotten out, if I'd done more networking and understood networking not as some kind of schmoozy thing you do at cocktail parties, but as a intentional action of building a relationship with somebody and finding out and doing informational interviews with them to find out what they do for their living, and if that's something that resonates with me and something I want to do. I left the Army probably like everybody else, thinking I was going to go into project management. And I was initially looking for roles in that area. I'm currently a consultant in DC working with government, and so I think my job is akin to that, but not really. I'll leave it at that. It was a suggestion from someone going hey, the Army has a resource, it's called Onward to Opportunity. I think it's done through Syracuse University, and they'll pay for you to get your PMP certificate. And at first, at least doing all my research, that seemed like a role that would translate well from being in the military and planning and making operations happen to a professional career outside of the military. I wound up pursuing a whole bunch of project management roles that I had found online. So I transitioned out of the military in March of 2020, and that was just before COVID hit. I had no idea that COVID was even a thing until I got out of the military, and the world shut down and the economy kind of closed up. And so most of my job search was done virtually, and it was just a matter of finding job postings either on LinkedIn or searching around different companies in different cities that I was targeting. I had the opportunity to go to a couple online virtual career fairs, and so I was able to interact with some recruiters there, and I was pursuing the project manager route through that. I'm currently a senior consultant at a consulting firm here in DC. Just because of like NDAs and industry standards, I can't tell you like who my clients are, but I work with government, and so a lot of the skills that made me successful in the Army are skills that I am relying on now, and I think have made me successful in my current role. I'd like to tell you that there was a better plan that I had in mind. As we were going through COVID, I found myself just like applying to any role that I thought I could like reasonably get or was in like my wheelhouse, because nobody at the time was hiring. I happened to find this one job. I thought it was like way outside my abilities or scope of abilities, I should say, and wound up applying to it. I never thought I would ever get this job. I thought it was way above what I was qualified for, and I'm just fortunate that I got it. So, which is not, for anybody coming out of the military, that's not how you should be doing it. You shouldn't be like just throwing your resume into the void and just applying to any job you can. If I were to go back and do it smarter, I would focus, especially in the last year of like being in service, on networking and making sure like talking to other people that are consultants or doing whatever kind of job that I might be interested in on the civilian side, and kind of understanding what they do day to day. It would have helped me find either this role or a similar role, especially since I had a classmate that was at the same company as me. And there are plenty of other people, or especially West Point grads, that are in the company that I am and I've connected with since. I couldn't tell you why I'm at the current level I'm at. So I'm at a senior consultant, which is usually someone who has like a master's degree. I don't have a master's degree. If I were to take a wild guess, just putting it in terms of like financial quantities, I think I at least conveyed on my resume that I had the ability to like handle that much revenue. Because any company is going to hire you, like you are there to either like drive costs down or increase profits for the company, because it's a business at the end of the day. And so if you're looking for a job at $120,000 a year, you need a resume that supports, you know, $1.5 to $1.8 million in revenue for you doing your role for the company. And so I think, and I would hope, that I have the resume that supports me at this current role, but I never thought I would get this role. And so I'm fortunate that I was able to do it and afford the lifestyle that I have right now, and use this role as like the jumping, you know, starting point for the next thing. I get to use a lot of the skills that I learned in the military, which makes it a very easy transition to get into like the company, because they know, you know, what you've done, because there's other veterans there that are successful, and I get to rely on those skills a lot. The one frustration that I have, at least right now, and probably for any of the other veterans, is that you have to take those skills and translate them to the civilian world. And so like the same skills that made me successful in the Army, long term may not help me be successful and grow in this role. So I have to learn how to, like, you know, be a civilian, how to be a successful civilian, while still holding on to those skills that help me be successful. I'm trying to define those. That's the honest answer. Is I think like any veteran coming out of the military is going to struggle with what they do like post-military, right? Because you leave the military and it's very structured. Like, you know, you're going to go to Korea and you have to be there on whatever day with all of your stuff. You're going to move around the world and you're going to show up at one point and you're going to be okay. That is not, you don't have that in the civilian world. You know, if I lost my job tomorrow, and I don't think I will, the landlord would still expect rent for the month. So you kind of have to, you have a lot more responsibility to plan out your own future. And now that I like see that there's a lot of opportunities out there, especially having no college debt because I went to West Point, and having, you know, a significant amount of the GI Bill, which is an amazing resource to go back to school and get additional, you know, education. I'm still trying to figure out what that next mountain looks like and how I find my values and my own mission set post-military and you know, put myself down that path. So I was a constitutional law major in college and still find myself being like a national security nerd, which is great in being in DC because there's national security nerds and policy wonks that are all over the place, and they love to talk about these things and be able to pick their brains. Hey, that's pretty awesome. So I'd like to explore that more and see what other opportunities are out there. I would assume that the same values that bring anybody into the military or to West Point are the same values that are bringing them here to DC. So I'm, surrounded by people with similar values that have similar ideas as me, and that's really exciting for me being here in DC. Ish, right? There's a certain level of like, okay, now I'm out, I have my job, I'm stable. How do we like expand? What's that next thing that I'm looking for? What's that next challenge? That second mountain that's going to get me from here to what's next. And so I would say, yes, I'm satisfied, but there's a certain level of hunger there to find the next thing and kind of keep pushing. So I'd say like network. I've harped on that before, at least in this conversation, but network, talk to people. There's plenty of veterans in my role or similar roles that want to see other veterans succeed. And so I have talked to, not only West Point grads, but other, there was a kid who in Ranger Regiment out in Washington who was enlisted and looking to come into consulting. So I helped, point him in the direction that I thought, his skills might be beneficial here in DC and at the company. But there are a lot of veterans out there that want to see other veterans succeed. It's just a matter of like hunting them out and finding them and identifying them. For anybody else that is like 60 to 90 days out, I'd say, one, do a lot of homework to make sure you're good on the transition. The best thing I think anybody could do is like sit down and just take notes about what they want to do. Figure out everything they're looking for in their next life. So if you, want to be on the golf course at 4:45 every day, or, have horses and you need acreage, well, having a job consulting in Manhattan isn't going to work for you. So you need to find a lifestyle that you want that fits the location you want and the job. So having the ability to sit down and kind of like map out everything you want from your life, and we'll give you a better idea of what you're looking for and help guide your search. And then the other thing is like make sure your I Love Me book, that binder of all your documents and paperwork is up to snuff. I went to get my DD 214, and if I had signed it the way it was, I would have left as like a first lieutenant with no combat experience, and I was leaving as a captain with several other awards, airborne school being one of them, and time in Iraq. And so that counts, especially if you're looking for benefits or opportunities within the government afterwards. So to make sure like your I Love Me book is squared away and you have all the certificates to show that person like, yep, these are my awards, this is everything I've done. That's going to help you transition out successfully, because no one is going to care about your transition out as much as you do. Going back like even 9 months out from my ETS, I think there was a lot of fear, anxiety, a certain level of ambiguity, not knowing exactly what that next thing was, but knowing like, hey, you're out, you got to go find the next thing. And so that was a major concern that I had going up to signing my final paperwork. Once I like signed out on leave for the last time, it felt like refreshing. There was a certain level of like, okay, now I get to do what I want and I get to go find the next mission and write chapter number 2, if you will. So that was really exciting, but also, there's a lot of fear and anxiety there because you've been in the military for, if you're my case, that's 5 years of your service obligation plus 4 years of West Point, so that's 9 years. So for the better part of a decade, like your identity has been wearing that American flag patch on your right shoulder. And so to take off that uniform for the last time and fold it up and pack it into a box, that could be, you know, a little nerve-wracking. The next chapter. And this is gonna sound corny. I watched an interview with Donald Glover, right? So Donald Glover did Community, he does stand-up comedy, and he was Childish Gambino. And he said he really likes the idea of living a life in chapters. So like his music career, I think for him is over because he said like, it's done. And so for like, it's you know, it's corny, but for me it was like, okay, this is done now. I've left it on the note that I wanted to leave it on, and I can like put that away knowing like I'm exhausted, that's done. I'm proud of my service and glad of everything I did, but it's time to move on and find the next thing.